My name is Stacy Hernandez, and I am 30 years old. 6 years ago, my mother looked me in the eye and asked, "Why celebrate wiping bedpans?" She was talking about my nursing school graduation. She said it casually, as if she were asking about the weather. My father stood next to her, nodding. My brother Cameron was in the other room, packing his clubs for a tournament in California. That tournament was on the same day as my graduation. They chose the tournament. I didn't scream. I didn't slam doors. I quietly left their house and made a decision. I would never ask them for anything again. They didn't know that I had just been offered a research position. They didn't know that the bedpan work they mocked would soon save nearly 200 lives. And when they walked into that ballroom years later, dressed in their finest, ready to network with Arizona's elite, what they witnessed made them hang their heads in shame. This is the story of how I disappeared from their world and built my own. Let me take you back 3 months before that conversation. To understand what happened, you need to understand my family. We lived in North Scottsdale, Arizona. Our house was 4,200 square feet, nestled in a gated community where the monthly HOA fees alone could cover most people's rent. My parents, Victoria and Lawrence Hernandez, had been members of Oak Hills Country Club for 18 years. The membership cost $85,000 annually. That's not a typo. 85,000 for the privilege of playing golf with the right people. My mother, Victoria, was 52 at the time. She had been president of the Oak Hills Women's Committee from 2015 to 2017. She wore Chanel to charity galas and could name-drop judges, CEOs, and state politicians over brunch without breaking stride. My father, Lawrence, was 55. He was a senior partner at a commercial law firm downtown. He played golf every Saturday with clients whose last names appeared on buildings. And then there was Cameron, my older brother, 28 years old in 2019. He worked at our father's law firm, not because he earned it, but because his last name was already on the letterhead. Cameron had been playing golf since he was 12. His handicap was an 8, which apparently meant something impressive to people who cared about that sort of thing. To my parents, Cameron's golf game wasn't just a hobby. It was a networking tool, a status symbol, proof that the Hernandez family belonged. I was 24. I was finishing my Bachelor of Science in Nursing at Arizona State University. I had a 3.92 GPA. I had a $12,000 per year scholarship that covered half my tuition, and I worked 20 hours a week at Phoenix Memorial Hospital as a nurse's aide to cover the rest. I lived in a 480 square foot studio apartment in Tempe, 15 miles from my parents' house. I drove a 2011 Honda Civic with a crack in the windshield. We had family dinners 3 times a month. That was the rule. Every dinner followed the same script. I remember one night in February 2019. We sat at the long oak dining table, 8 seats but only 4 of us. My mother poured wine for herself, my father, and Cameron. I got water. Not because I asked for it, but because no one offered me wine. The conversation began, as it always did, with Cameron. "Cameron, darling," my mother said, cutting into her salmon. "Did you speak with the club pro about your putting? The Andersons will be watching at the tournament. First impressions matter." Cameron nodded. "I've been working on it. Coach thinks I can drop 2 strokes by May." My father leaned forward. "The Andersons' son is a VP at Remington Holdings. If you play well, Lawrence, it could open doors for the firm." I sat at the far end of the table, closest to the kitchen. The chandelier light reflected off their wine glasses. I had a glass of water with a lemon wedge I'd put in myself. I tried. I shouldn't have, but I did. "My graduation is May 18th, I said quietly. The table went silent, for exactly 3 seconds. Then my father turned to Cameron. "What time is your tea time in California?" Cameron didn't even look at me. 9:30 a.m., first round. And just like that, the conversation moved on. That was life in the Hernandez house. I was furniture. But I wasn't the only one who noticed. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through my mother's iPad. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter when I stopped by to pick up some old textbooks I'd stored in the garage. An email was open. I shouldn't have read it. But I did. The email was from my mother to her friend Vera, another Oak Hills member. Vera, yes, Stacy is finishing up her program. She's still figuring out her path. Cameron, however, is doing wonderfully. State championship next month. We're so proud. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot. I created a folder on my phone and labeled it Receipts. That email was the first file. I didn't confront my mother. I didn't print it out and leave it on her pillow. I just saved it and left. Because here's what I was learning. My family didn't see me. And if I wanted to survive, I needed to stop expecting them to. Cameron's world was different. His bedroom, well, his suite, took up the entire west wing of the house. Trophies lined the shelves, framed photos of him shaking hands with Arizona state senators, country club presidents, firm partners. His closet had more square footage than my entire apartment. My childhood bedroom? My mother had converted it into a guest room the month I moved into the dorms for my freshman year. When I came home for Thanksgiving in 2018, I walked in and saw a queen-sized bed with decorative pillows and a framed print that said Home Sweet Home. My high school graduation photo, the one that used to hang above my desk, was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Then I took a photo with my phone. I sent it to my Aunt Ruth with the caption, "I guess I don't live here anymore." Ruth called me 10 minutes later. "Stacy, sweetheart, are you okay?" I wasn't, but I said, "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." "Aunt Ruth, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When did you realize you didn't need their approval?" There was a pause. Ruth was my father's older sister. She was 68 years old in 2019. She had worked as a head nurse at Phoenix General for 43 years before retiring. My parents barely spoke to her. She'd never married, never had children, and had spent her life in scrubs instead of cocktail dresses. In my mother's world, Ruth was a cautionary tale. In mine, she was the only person who saw me. "Stacy," Ruth said quietly, "I realized it the day I stopped asking them to see me, the day I started seeing myself. I didn't know it then, but that phone call would save my life." While my family obsessed over Cameron's golf swing, I was living a completely different existence. I worked 3 12-hour night shifts per week in the ICU at Phoenix Memorial Hospital. 48 patients per month, 12 beds per unit. 6 of those beds usually had patients on ventilators. I charted vitals, monitored sepsis protocols, caught medication errors before they killed people. No one at home ever asked me about my shifts. Not once. But someone else noticed. Dr. Janet Morrison was the ICU director. She was 62, sharp as a scalpel, and she didn't tolerate mediocrity. One night in March 2019, I was standing at the nurses' station at 2 in the morning. I'd been tracking a patient in bed 12, a 68-year-old man in septic shock. His vitals were borderline, but something felt off. I couldn't explain it. I just knew. I adjusted his IV drip without waiting for the doctor's order. 30 minutes later, his blood pressure stabilized. 2 hours later, Dr. Morrison walked past and stopped. "You changed his protocol," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" "Because he needed it." She looked at me for a long moment. "Come to my office tomorrow before your shift." The next evening, I sat across from Dr. Morrison in her small, windowless office. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. "I'm nominating you for the Dean's Clinical Excellence Award," she said. "Don't tell anyone yet. But Stacy, you have something most nurses take 10 years to develop. You see patterns before they become emergencies. Don't waste that." I stared at the paper. It was a nomination form. My name was already typed at the top. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing." I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. I felt seen. And then, 2 weeks later, The email arrived. It was April 30th, 2019. I was getting ready for my shift when my phone buzzed. An email from my mother. Subject line: about May 18th. I sat down on my bed. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. The email read, Stacy, your father and I have discussed the logistics for mid-May. Cameron's Arizona State Amateur Championship is in Pebble Beach that weekend. It's a significant event. Several club members will be there, including Judge Patterson and the CEO of Remington Holdings. Your graduation ceremony is, of course, important to you, but realistically, it's just walking across a stage. Cameron's tournament is a real opportunity for family visibility. I hope you understand. We'll celebrate you another time. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. I didn't cry. Not then. I forwarded the email to my receipts folder. Then I texted my Aunt Ruth. Can you come to my graduation? You'll be the only one there. She replied in 30 seconds. I'll be in the front row. I put my phone down. I stared at the wall. And I made a decision. I would never need them again. The next 2 weeks were strange. I kept waiting for my mother to call, to say she'd reconsidered, to say that maybe my father could go to Cameron's tournament and she could come to my graduation. Something. She never called. 1 week before graduation, I almost broke. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital after a night shift. It was 11 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty. I pulled out my phone and started typing a text to my mother. Mom, my graduation really means a lot to me. Is there any way? I stopped. I stared at the words, then I deleted them. If I had to beg for them to show up, then their presence meant nothing. I put my phone away and drove home. The next day, a message popped up in the family group chat. The chat was called Hernandez Fam. I hadn't muted it yet. I don't know why. Cameron sent a photo of his golf clubs lined up in the garage. The caption read, Ready to crush Pebble Beach. My mother replied immediately, So proud of you, darling. My father sent a screenshot of 3 business-class plane tickets. Booked and ready. Let's do this. Cameron replied, You guys are the best. Love you. I scrolled through the messages. No one had mentioned my graduation, not once. I opened the text box. I started typing. My graduation is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I stared at the message for a full minute, then I deleted it. I muted the group chat. I put my phone down. The morning of May 18th, I woke up at 6 a.m. I made coffee. I put on my cap and gown alone in my studio apartment. The fabric felt heavy. The tassel kept falling in my face. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and adjusted it 3 times. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Ruth. Good morning, sweetheart. I'm leaving now. I'll be there early. Thank you, Ruth. Stacy, listen to me. You did this, not them. Today is yours. Hold your head high. I will. I'm proud of you. I hung up. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. Then my phone buzzed again. Voicemail, from my mother. I didn't listen to it. Not then. I just stared at the notification. Then I grabbed my keys and left. The ceremony was at Sun Devil Stadium. It was 10 in the morning, and it was already 95 degrees. 320 nursing students were graduating that day. Thousands of family members filled the stands. I walked into the stadium and found my seat in the graduates section. I looked up into the family seating area. I'd reserved 4 seats. Each one had a small card with a name printed on it. Victoria Hernandez, Lawrence Hernandez, Cameron Hernandez, and one more, Ruth Callahan. Only one of those seats would be filled. Aunt Ruth was already there, sitting in the front row of the family section. She was 74 years old, wearing a floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat to block the sun. When she saw me, she waved. I waved back. The 3 empty seats next to her stayed empty. The ceremony began. The dean gave a speech about service and compassion. I barely heard it. I kept glancing up at those empty chairs. When my name was called, Stacy Hernandez, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, summa cum laude. I stood up and walked across the stage. Aunt Ruth stood up in the stands. She clapped so loudly that people around her turned to look. She was the only person standing in that entire section. I received my diploma. I shook the dean's hand. I smiled for the camera. And the whole time, I could feel the absence of those 3 empty chairs like a weight pressing down on my chest. After the ceremony, I walked back to find Aunt Ruth. She was waiting at the edge of the stadium, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be." We stood there for a moment. Then my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. I opened it. My mother had posted a photo. It was a picture of her, my father, and Cameron standing on a golf course. The sky was blue. The grass was impossibly green. Cameron was holding a golf club, grinning. My mother had her arm around him. My father was smiling in the background. The caption read, "Watching my champion compete today. So proud of this young man. Family is everything. Hashtag proud mom. Hashtag Pebble Beach. Hashtag family first." The post had been uploaded at 11:15 a.m., 15 minutes after I walked across the stage. I stared at the photo, at the caption, at the hashtag family first. I took a screenshot. I added it to my receipts folder. The folder now had 12 files. I didn't cry. Aunt Ruth looked at my face. "Stacy? Can we leave now?" "Of course." We walked to her car in silence. She drove me back to my apartment. On the way, I finally listened to my mother's voicemail. Her voice came through the speaker, bright and casual, like she was calling to ask about dinner plans. "Stacy, hi, darling. We're boarding now. I just wanted to say, don't be dramatic about this. It's not like you're becoming a real doctor. This is just practical. You'll have many graduations in life. Cameron only has one shot at state championships. We'll talk soon. Love you." I listened to it once. Then I saved it. Aunt Ruth glanced over at me. "Are you okay?" I stared out the window. The Arizona desert stretched out on both sides of the highway. Saguaro cacti stood tall and silent against the sky. "Aunt Ruth, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When does it stop hurting?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When you stop expecting them to change." I nodded. I didn't say anything else. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. I opened my laptop. I looked at the folder labeled Receipts, 12 files, emails, screenshots, voicemails. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew what they said. I closed the folder, then I opened a new one. I named it Phoenix Memorial Research. I started typing. June 3rd, 2019. My first official shift as a full-time ICU nurse at Phoenix Memorial Hospital. 36 hours per week. 12-hour shifts. 3 days on, 4 days off. Starting salary, $58,000 per year. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I walked into the ICU at 6:30 in the morning. The unit had 12 beds. 8 of them were occupied. 4 patients were on ventilators. The air smelled like disinfectant and the faint metallic tang of blood. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm. The lights were fluorescent and harsh. I loved it. My first patient was a 68-year-old man in bed 12. Septic shock, blood pressure unstable. He'd been in the ICU for 4 days. The night shift nurse handed me his chart and said, "Good luck, he's a fighter." I spent 14 hours with that patient. I checked his vitals every 30 minutes. I adjusted his IV drips. I monitored his oxygen levels. I charted everything. At 11 p.m., his blood pressure finally stabilized. When I left the hospital that night, my feet ached. My scrub smelled like sweat and disinfectant. My hair was falling out of its ponytail. And I felt more alive than I had in months. My coworker, Linda, caught up with me in the parking lot. "Stacy, you okay? You've been here 14 hours straight." "I'm fine," I said. I just like staying busy. Linda gave me a look. Girl, you need to go home and sleep. I will. But I didn't. I went home and opened my laptop. I started documenting the sepsis case from bed 12. I noted the interventions that worked, the ones that didn't, the patterns I was starting to see. At 2 in the morning, Dr. Morrison walked past my station during her rounds. She stopped when she saw me still there. You're still here? I wanted to make sure he stabilized. She looked at me for a long moment. Come to my office tomorrow. We need to talk. The next day, I sat across from Dr. Morrison again. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. Stacy, I've been watching you. You chart better than nurses with 10 years of experience. You catch things before they become emergencies. I want you on a project. What kind of project? Sepsis intervention. We're going to track every sepsis case in this ICU for the next 12 months. I want to see if we can reduce intervention time and improve outcomes. You'll lead data collection. I stared at her. Me? You don't miss anything, Stacy. That's rare. If this works, we'll submit the findings to the Journal of Critical Care. Your name will be first author. My name? You'll earn it. I walked out of her office in a daze. That night, I called Aunt Ruth. Ruth, something happened today. Good or bad? Good, I think. Dr. Morrison asked me to lead a research project. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Stacy, do you know why I became a nurse? Why? Because I wanted to matter in a way that didn't require anyone's permission. You're doing that now. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Meanwhile, my family was silent. From June to December 2019, my parents called me 3 times. Once on my birthday in July. Once to invite me to Thanksgiving. Once in early December to ask if I was coming home for Christmas. I didn't answer any of the calls. Cameron never called at all. I didn't block their numbers. I just let them ring. Let the voicemails pile up. I didn't listen to them. In late November, my mother sent me an email. Subject line: Thanksgiving. Stacy, we'd love to see you for Thanksgiving. Cameron is bringing his new girlfriend, Sophie. It would mean a lot to have the whole family together. I read the email twice. Then I closed it. I didn't reply. On Thanksgiving Day, I worked a 12-hour shift in the ICU. I ate turkey in the hospital cafeteria with Linda and 2 other nurses. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. Every 2 weeks, I met Aunt Ruth at a cafe called Cafe Lux in Scottsdale. We'd sit at the same corner table by the window, looking out at Camelback Mountain. Ruth would order a cappuccino. I'd order black coffee, and we'd talk. Not about my parents, not about Cameron, just about life, about nursing, about the patients I was seeing, the research I was doing. One afternoon in October, Ruth looked at me over her coffee cup and said, Stacy, your mother called me last week. I looked up. What did she say? She asked if you were okay. I told her you were thriving. What did she say to that? Nothing. She just hung up. I nodded slowly. I wasn't surprised. Ruth reached across the table and put her hand over mine. You know what the hardest part is? Not that they don't see you. It's that they don't want to see you. I know. But you're building something they can't touch. And that's power, Stacy. Real power. By December 2019, the Sepsis Protocol Project was showing results. In 6 months, we'd tracked 48 cases. Average intervention time had dropped from 4.2 hours to 2.1 hours. Dr. Morrison presented the preliminary data at a hospital-wide meeting in front of 40 physicians and nurses. She stood at the front of the conference room with a PowerPoint slide showing our numbers. This data, she said, represents a potential 35% reduction in sepsis mortality, and it was driven by a nurse who graduated 6 months ago. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. I was sitting in the back row, wearing scrubs, my hair in a messy bun. A few doctors nodded. One of them, a cardiologist named Dr. Ellis, walked up to me after the meeting. "Stacy Hernandez?" "Yes, sir. I'll be watching your career." I drove home that night and called Aunt Ruth. "Ruth, I think I just found my family." "What do you mean?" "The people at the hospital. They see me, they see what I'm doing." Ruth's voice was soft. "Then that's your family, sweetheart. Blood doesn't make family. Seeing does." I hung up the phone and sat in my apartment. I looked around at the small space, 480 square feet, a futon, a desk, a kitchen the size of a closet. It was mine, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. March 2020. COVID-19 hit Phoenix. I'll never forget the first week. The ICU went from 12 beds to 24, then 36. We converted 2 entire floors into COVID units. Patients came in faster than we could chart them. Ventilators ran 24 hours a day. The sound of alarms was constant. I volunteered for the COVID ICU, 60 hours per week, sometimes 70. I wore full PPE for 12-hour shifts: gown, gloves, N95 mask, face shield. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I could barely breathe. In the first 8 weeks, I watched 32 patients die, but I also saved lives. The sepsis protocol I'd been working on, it turned out that COVID patients who developed septic shock had better outcomes if we caught the signs early. The intervention time mattered. Every hour counted. By May 2020, I had saved 15 COVID patients from septic complications. By August, that number was 43. One night in June, I called Aunt Ruth at 2 in the morning. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot. I'd just finished a shift where 3 patients died and 4 survived. "Ruth, I don't know if I can keep doing this." "Yes, you can. I watched 3 people die tonight. And you saved 4. I was crying. I hadn't cried in over a year, but that night I broke. "Is that enough?" I whispered. "Sweetheart," Ruth said gently, "you're doing what angels do." I wiped my face. I took a breath. I went back inside and started my next shift. By the end of 2020, I had saved 78 lives. February 2021. The Journal of Critical Care published our sepsis study. The title was Early Sepsis Intervention Protocol in ICU Settings, a 12-month prospective study. The first author was listed as Stacy Hernandez, RN, BSN. I was sitting in the hospital break room when Dr. Morrison sent me the link. I opened it on my iPad. I stared at my name in print. Stacy Hernandez, first author. I cried. Not sad tears, something else. Something I didn't have a word for. I took a screenshot of the first page. I sent it to Aunt Ruth. "We did it," she replied immediately. "No, Stacy, you did it." I wanted to send it to my parents, to show them, to say, see what I did? But I didn't, because I realized something in that moment. I didn't need them to see it. I already knew what I'd done. From 2020 to 2023, my parents didn't contact me once. Not during the pandemic, not after the publication, not ever. I checked my mother's Instagram occasionally, not because I missed her, just because I was curious. In 2021, she posted a photo of Cameron's engagement. He was on one knee in front of a woman named Sophie. The caption read, "Our boy is getting married, so proud." In 2022, they took a family vacation to Turks and Caicos. There were photos of my parents, Cameron, and Sophie on a yacht. Everyone was smiling. No one mentioned me. In 2023, Cameron made partner at the law firm. My mother posted a photo of him in front of the office with a plaque that read, "Hernandez and Associates." The caption, "Partner at 32. We always knew he'd make it. #proud parents." I wasn't in any of the photos. I closed Instagram. I didn't unfriend them. I didn't block them. I just let them exist in the background like ghosts. June 2022. I was promoted to Senior Clinical Nurse Specialist at Phoenix Memorial Hospital. I was 28 years old, the youngest person in the hospital's history to hold that title. My salary jumped to $78,000 per year. My role expanded. I wasn't just working in the ICU anymore. I was training new nurses. I was consulting on sepsis protocols across multiple departments. The hospital held a small ceremony. The CEO, Daniel Wright, handed me a certificate in front of about 150 staff members. "Stacy," he said, shaking my hand, "in 3 years, you've changed how we practice medicine here. That's not common." The room applauded. I looked out into the audience. Aunt Ruth was sitting in the front row, right in the family section. The 4 seats next to her were empty. After the ceremony, my coworker Linda came up to me. "Stacy, where's your family?" I smiled and turned to Aunt Ruth. "You're looking at her." October 2023. I was invited to present at the National Nurses Conference in San Diego. 800 nurses attended. I stood on a stage in the San Diego Convention Center and presented my sepsis research. The slide behind me read, 189 lives saved. That was the number. Not an estimate, not a guess. 189 documented cases where early sepsis intervention had saved a life. I finished my presentation, and the room gave me a standing ovation. It lasted 4 minutes. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me. She introduced herself as Linda Chen, a board member of the American Nurses Association. "Stacy, I'd like to nominate you for something. Can we talk?" We sat in a quiet corner of the convention hall. She pulled out a folder. "Have you heard of the Florence Nightingale Medal?" "Yes." "It's awarded to nurses who demonstrate exceptional clinical excellence and measurable impact on patient outcomes. I'd like to nominate you for the 2025 award." I stared at her. "Me?" "You've saved 189 lives, Stacy. Your protocol is being used in 52 hospitals nationwide. You're exactly who this award was created for." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. "The ceremony will be in December 2025 in Scottsdale," she said, "at the Phoenician Resort." Scottsdale, my hometown. "I'll send you the nomination paperwork," she continued. "Finalists will be notified by September." I walked out of that convention center in a daze. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot and stared at the ocean in the distance. Then I called Aunt Ruth. "Ruth, something just happened." "What?" "I was nominated for the Florence Nightingale Medal." There was silence. Then I heard Ruth crying. "Oh my God, Stacy, do you know what this means? I think my life is about to change." November 15th, 2023. I received an email from the American Nurses Association. Subject: Florence Nightingale Medal Nomination. Dear Ms. Hernandez, you have been nominated for the 2025 Florence Nightingale Medal, awarded to nurses who demonstrate exceptional clinical excellence and measurable impact on patient outcomes. The award ceremony will be held December 14th, 2025, at the Phoenician Resort, Scottsdale, Arizona. Finalists will be notified by September 2025. Sincerely, American Nurses Credentialing Center. I read the email 5 times. I was sitting in my car outside Phoenix Memorial Hospital. It was 11 p.m. My hands were shaking. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Aunt Ruth. She called me immediately. "Stacy, this is it." "I know." "Do you think your parents will find out?" "I don't know." "And Ruth?" "Yes." "I don't care." September 22nd, 2025. I was working a shift in the ICU when my phone rang. Unknown number. I stepped into the break room and answered. "Is this Stacy Hernandez?" "Yes." "This is Linda Chen from the American Nurses Association. Stacy, congratulations. You've been selected as the 2025 Florence Nightingale Medal recipient." I sat down. The room spun. "I won?" "You didn't just win, Stacy. You're the youngest recipient in 30 years. The ceremony will be held December 14th at the Phoenician Resort in Scottsdale. You'll be honored in front of 600 guests. 600? This is the biggest nursing gala in the country. Hospital executives, philanthropists, healthcare leaders. It's a big deal. I hung up the phone and just sat there. Then I called Aunt Ruth. Ruth, I won. She started crying immediately. Stacy, oh, sweetheart. The ceremony is December 14th, at the Phoenician. That's in Scottsdale. I know. There was a pause. Then Ruth said, What about your parents? What about them? They live in Scottsdale. I know, but this isn't about them, Ruth. This is about me. And I want you there. You're my +1. I wouldn't miss it for the world. 2 weeks later, in early October, I received an email from the ANA with details about the gala. At the bottom of the email was a list of sponsors. I scrolled through it casually, and then I stopped. Platinum sponsor, $50,000. Hernandez and Associates, legal counsel. Cameron Hernandez. Partner. I stared at the screen. Cameron's law firm was sponsoring the gala, which meant my parents would be invited as VIP guests. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Aunt Ruth. Cameron's firm is sponsoring the event. They'll be there. She called me immediately. Do they know you're the honoree? No, the honoree isn't announced publicly until the event. So they'll just think it's a networking event. Exactly. Ruth was quiet. Then she said, Poetic justice. Maybe. Are you going to tell them? I thought about it. For a long time. No, I finally said. I'm not. November 2025. Somewhere in North Scottsdale, my mother received a formal invitation to the gala. I didn't know this at the time, but I found out later. The invitation was engraved on heavy cardstock. It read, You are cordially invited to the 2025 Florence Nightingale Medal Gala. December 14th, 2025. The Phoenician Resort, Scottsdale, Arizona. Black tie event. Honoring excellence in nursing. My mother showed it to my father over breakfast. This looks like a good event, she said. Healthcare executives will be there. Good for Cameron's firm. My father nodded. We should bring Cameron and Sophie. Good visibility. They RSVP'd. Yes. They had no idea who was being honored. December 10th, 2025. 4 days before the gala. I was sitting on my couch when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. Hi Stacy, this is Mom. We'll be in Scottsdale December 14th for a work event at the Phoenician. Would love to see you for coffee if you're free. It's been too long. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. She didn't know. She had no idea. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Aunt Ruth. She has no idea. Ruth replied, Do you think you'll see her? I stared at the text for a long time. Then I replied to Ruth, Yes, but not the way she thinks. I didn't reply to my mother's text. I just let it sit there, unread, unanswered. December 13th, 2025, 1 day before the gala. I tried on my dress. It was midnight blue, floor length, with a fitted bodice. I'd bought it 2 months earlier. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and looked at myself. I wasn't the 24-year-old girl who graduated alone anymore. I was 30. I had saved 189 lives. My research was published. My protocol was used in 52 hospitals. I didn't need them to see me, but tomorrow they would. I practiced my speech in the mirror. Good evening. My name is Stacy Hernandez. 6 years ago, I graduated from nursing school alone. I stopped. I shook my head. No, that's not how I would start. I would start with the patients, because that's what mattered. I called Aunt Ruth. Are you ready for tomorrow? I've been ready for 6 years. December 14th, 2025, 6 p.m. Aunt Ruth and I arrived at the Phoenician Resort. The ballroom was massive. 80 round tables draped in white linens. A stage at the front with a backdrop that read, Florence Nightingale Medal 2025. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. 600 guests in black tie attire. I wore my midnight blue dress. Aunt Ruth wore a formal navy gown. We walked in together. A woman at the entrance checked our names. Ms. Hernandez, you're at table 1, the honoree table. Table 1 was directly in front of the stage. I scanned the room. I found table 12, the VIP sponsor section. 4 place cards sat on the table. Mr. Lawrence Hernandez. Mrs. Victoria Hernandez. Mr. Cameron Hernandez. Mrs. Sophie Hernandez. They weren't there yet. Ruth and I sat down at table 1. She reached over and squeezed my hand. How are you feeling? I don't know yet. At 6:45, I saw them walk in. My mother was wearing a black Chanel gown. My father wore a tuxedo. Cameron was in a dark suit and Sophie, who I'd never met, wore a silver dress. They looked exactly like I remembered, polished, perfect, confident. They walked to table 12 and sat down. My mother immediately started scanning the room, looking for people to network with. She didn't look at table 1. She didn't see me. At 7:15, the lights dimmed. A woman walked onto the stage. It was Linda Chen, the ANA board member who had nominated me. Good evening, everyone, she said into the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight. We gather to honor a nurse whose work has redefined critical care in America. The room went quiet. Over the past 6 years, Linda continued, this nurse has developed a sepsis intervention protocol that has been adopted by 52 hospitals nationwide. Her work has saved an estimated 189 lives. The screen behind her lit up. A slideshow began. Photos of hospital rooms. Blurred faces of patients. Quotes appeared on the screen. She saved my father. She didn't give up on me. She saw what the doctors missed. I glanced at table 12. My mother was smiling politely, sipping champagne. My father was leaning back in his chair. Cameron was checking his phone. They had no idea. At 7:25, Linda stepped forward again. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the 2025 Florence Nightingale Medal recipient. The spotlight moved from the stage to the audience. It landed on table 1, on me. Please welcome Stacy Hernandez. The room erupted in applause. I stood up slowly. The camera zoomed in on my face. The screen behind the stage, 40 feet wide, showed me in real time. I looked at table 12. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand. It hit the table and tipped over. Champagne spilled across the white tablecloth. My father's mouth fell open. Cameron stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Sophie leaned over to Cameron and whispered something. He didn't respond. The entire ballroom, 600 people, stood up, a standing ovation. I walked toward the stage. The applause was deafening. When I reached the microphone, I looked out at the audience, at Aunt Ruth, who was crying, at table 12, where my family sat frozen. I took a breath, and I began. Good evening, my name is Stacy Hernandez. 6 years ago, I walked across a stage to receive my nursing degree. One person was there to see me. I paused. I looked at Aunt Ruth. My Aunt Ruth. The camera cut to Ruth. She was wiping her eyes. I won't lie, I continued. That hurt. But it also freed me. Because I realized something that night. I didn't need anyone's permission to save lives. I paused. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on my mother for 2 seconds. She was staring at me, her face pale. This medal isn't just mine, I said. It belongs to every nurse who was told they were just a nurse. To everyone who was underestimated. To the 189 patients who trusted me when I was 24 and scared and alone in an ICU at 2 in the morning. The room was silent. When I started this work, I said, my voice steady, I was told that nursing was practical, that it wasn't worth celebrating, that I stopped. I looked directly at my mother, wiping bedpans. The silence in the room was absolute. But here's what I learned. Every life I saved mattered. Every protocol I perfected mattered. Every hour I spent studying sepsis data mattered. Not because someone told me it did, but because I knew it did. The applause started again, slowly at first, then louder. Linda Chen stepped forward and placed the medal around my neck. It was heavy, gold, engraved with my name. The applause became a roar, a standing ovation that lasted 4 minutes and 15 seconds. I stood on that stage and looked out at 600 people. All of them were standing, clapping, including my parents. But they weren't clapping because they were proud. They were clapping because they had to. I stepped down from the stage. I walked past table 12 without looking at them. I went straight to table 1 and hugged Aunt Ruth. She whispered in my ear, "You did it, sweetheart. We did it." At 8:15 during the cocktail hour after the ceremony, I was standing near the bar with Aunt Ruth when I saw them approaching. My mother, my father, Cameron. They walked up slowly, like they were approaching a stranger. My mother spoke first. Her voice was shaking. "Stacy, sweetheart, we had no idea." I turned to face her. My voice was calm, steady. "No idea about what, Mom? That I became someone worth knowing?" She flinched. My father stepped forward. "Stacy, we're so proud." "You're proud now," I said quietly. "But you weren't there when I needed you to be." Cameron opened his mouth. "Stace, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were doing all this." I looked at him, really looked at him. "You didn't know because you never asked." There was a long silence. Sophie, standing behind Cameron, looked uncomfortable. She didn't say anything. My mother's eyes were red. "Stacy, please, can we talk? Can we—" "Mom," I said softly, "I'm glad you could see what I've built, but I didn't build it for you." I turned to Aunt Ruth. "I think we're done here." Ruth nodded. We walked away. Behind me, I heard my mother start to cry. I didn't look back. The next 10 days were strange. From December 15th to December 25th, I received 14 messages from my family. Text from my mother, December 15th. "Stacy, please call me. I need to explain." Voicemail from my father, December 16th. "Sweetheart, we made mistakes, but we're still your family." Email from Cameron, December 18th. "Stace, I'm sorry I wasn't there. Can we meet for coffee?" Text from my mother, December 20th. "I told the club about your award. Everyone is so impressed." I read each message. I didn't respond to any of them. On December 23rd, I called Aunt Ruth. "They keep texting," I said. "What should I say? What do you want to say?" I thought about it for a long time. "I want to tell them the truth." "Then tell them." On December 26th, I sat down at my laptop and wrote one email. I addressed it to all 3 of them. Subject: boundaries. "Mom, Dad, Cameron, I received your messages. I appreciate the apologies. But I need you to understand. I don't need your pride now. I needed your presence then. I've built a life I'm proud of, not despite you, but without you. That's not anger, that's just truth. I'm open to occasional contact, but I won't pretend the past didn't happen. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it will be on my terms. And it will take time. Respectfully, Stacy." I hit send. 10 minutes later, my mother replied, "I understand. I'll wait." I read her response. I didn't reply. I closed my laptop. For the first time in 6 years, I felt free. On January 5th, 2026, I opened my laptop and navigated to the folder labeled Receipts. 18 files, emails, screenshots, voicemails. Instagram posts. I looked at them for a long time. Then I selected all of them. I clicked delete. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to delete receipts? I paused for 10 seconds. Then I clicked yes. The folder disappeared. I called Aunt Ruth. You deleted it? She asked. I don't need evidence anymore, I said. I have my life. In early January 2026, I received a job offer. National Nursing Consultant for the American Nurses Association. Salary, $95,000 per year. The job involved traveling to hospitals across the country to train nurses on sepsis protocols. I would be helping save lives on a national scale. I accepted the offer immediately. My first assignment was in Seattle. 80 nurses, 3-day training session. I packed my suitcase. I looked around my apartment. I looked at the medal on my shelf. Then I texted Aunt Ruth. I'm going to Seattle next week, first training session. She replied, Look at you, changing the world. In mid-February, Aunt Ruth and I drove to Camelback Mountain. It was a tradition we'd started years ago. We'd hike to the top and sit on the rocks and talk. The sun was setting. The sky was pink and orange. Scottsdale stretched out below us. Stacy, Ruth said, do you think they'll ever really understand what they missed? I thought about it. Does it matter? No, she said. I guess it doesn't. We sat in silence for a while. Then Ruth said, You spent 6 years proving you didn't need them. Now you get to spend the rest of your life knowing it. I looked out at the desert, at the city, at the life I'd built. I used to climb this mountain, I said, and wonder when I'd feel like I belonged. Now I know I belonged all along, just not to them. Ruth put her arm around me. You found your people, Stacy. I did. In early March, I received a text from my mother. Stacy, I saw your name in the Journal of Nursing. I'm reading your work now. I'm trying to understand. I love you. I read the message 3 times. I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit there for 3 days. Then, finally, I wrote back. Thank you, Mom. I appreciate that you're trying. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just acknowledgement. And that was enough, for now. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in late March, I sat in my apartment. I looked at the medal on my shelf. I thought about the last 6 years, the nights I worked alone in the ICU, the patients I saved, the research I published, the award I won, the ballroom, the standing ovation, my mother's face when she realized who I'd become. And I realized something. I didn't need them to see me anymore, because I'd already seen myself. I thought about what I would say if someone asked me, was it worth it? And the answer was simple. Yes, because I chose myself. I chose my patients. I chose the people who saw me, like Aunt Ruth, like Dr. Morrison, like the 80 nurses I'd be training next week in Seattle. I chose the life I wanted, and that choice saved me. Before we wrap up, I want to say something. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've ever had to build something beautiful out of nothing, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Because I'm not done telling stories like this. Stories about people who chose themselves, who built lives worth living, who walked away from people who couldn't see them and found people who could. There's power in that. Real power. They say you can't choose your family. But I did. I chose the patients who trusted me. I chose the colleagues who saw me. I chose the aunt who never left. That's my family. And I'm finally home.